Hey, happy Friday. Welcome to the VML. My name's Haiyue. I'm here with Beky Bell, and we are bringing you coverage from week number 3 of season 7 of the VML. And before we get started, we have to talk about our awesome sponsors because they are great, and without them, the VML could not happen. So a massive thank you to NRG Series, our awesome WPN store partners, and just generally able to host the tournament organization side of things, keep us going. And NRG Series also have their own physical paper Magic tournaments that are going on right now, as well as online events. So make sure you go check them out. Go to MTG Melee, look for Nerd Rage Gaming, and enter some of their events. We, of course, this season 7 is also brought to you by our newest sponsors, Good Luck High Five, who are let's just say, the awesomest podcast in all of Magic.
Very true. Very true. Very easily true.
Yeah, like it's not even close. Not even close. And we actually had Megan from Good Luck High Five on last time you were casting, Beky.
Megan was so amazing to have. Before we even came on, I was talking about how amazing it was. Like, Megan's energy was just so fantastic. And on top of that, like, I'm a big animal fan. Like, I care very much about my pet. And being able to, like, watch Megan's cat just, like, run across the mic and just, like, watch her try to, like, contain her own excitement and happiness, just, like, in general. It was just so amazing and so infectious, and I loved having Megan on, and it was just so fantastic. And if you don't know Good Luck High Five, check it out. I have to also do like a fun little like shameless plug here. Ultra Pro is doing some TikToks with Good Luck High Five. They're all hilarious. So if you have a TikTok, you're interested in TikTok, check out the Ultra Pro account, see what they're making. They're very funny. They're absolutely amazing. I love them. They're great.
And if you are already fans of Good Luck High Five, I will say we may or may not be having a lovely, awesome, special guest appearance from Maria, also of Good Luck High Five, later on in the season. So that is something to look forward to for all of you in the future. And before we get down to what we're doing today, obviously, massive thank you to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring the VML, giving us invites, all of those things. We, with this tournament, this production would not be able to happen without them, and we'd like to really give a hand to them for all the support they've given us over the last couple of years, and here's to a long and fruitful relationship working with Wizards of the Coast in the future.
And I mean,
Beky,
yeah,
would you like to watch some Magic?
Oh, I'd love to watch some Magic. I mean, if for some reason, like, people are here right now watching Standard over Alchemy, I mean, Standard is the superior format. I'm sorry, yes. Wizards of the Coast. Standard is just better.
We just spent like 2 minutes being like, yes, Wizards, we love you. Thank you so much for making this possible. But also,
But also watch us instead.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Becky and I, look, we come from a world where we hold paper cards in our hands and the text on them stays the same throughout.
But
eternity.
At the same time, we did also spend the entire 15 minutes leading up to us coming live watching Alchemy on the Magic stream and commentating over it, like. And we kind of joked. We were like, let's just go live and just like have the first like 15 minutes until round 7 of the Alchemy event ends, just like commentating over the actual like Magic stream.
Should we just do that?
Honestly, like kind of a thought. Okay. Yeah.
Honestly, first of all, the two of us should just be commentating on the mainstream. Like, that's just facts. Like, and then second of all, on top of that, we should also just co-stream the PT sometime.
Sometime we should. Honestly, like, let's just do it. Like, it would be such a great
Beky
thing.
will put your graphics over it. We'll just stick the overlays on and we'll be like, look at this beautiful judged up production. Okay. So we do have judges in the chat, Beky, pointing out that there are times where the actual card text does change.
That's true. Yeah.
That is true. And that is true. And honestly, I started playing at the same time that like Hostage Seeker came out, and I was very confused. I didn't really understand. Do you remember like the card text was like wrong on Hostage Seeker? And I was just like, baby Magic player Haiyue was like, What do
I
you
can't even
mean?
imagine starting at that same time. I literally, like, cannot. The only other card I can, like, think of, like, as of recently was Corpse something. It's a zombie, but it, like, had a different power toughness than, like, was actually reflected, and it was, like, a promo card, which
Oh,
is, like, pretty,
yeah.
like,
Like it
whatever.
was like an uncommon, right? Like
Yeah.
yeah, and there was like there was a printing of it that was just wrong.
Yep.
They just
Yeah,
had
yeah,
the wrong.
it was the store promo printing that was
Right.
incorrect, and that's, like, a silly, like, whatever thing, but, like, now those cards are worth, like, $4
So
more
much
because they're
money.
incorrect, which is, like, a
Yeah.
silly part of the thing. Like, I've also been, like, low-key involved in, like, both the art and just, like, collectible card market in general, and, like, the amount of difference in pricing that you can find for, like, misprints in general has always just, like, fascinated me. So that's just, like, one of those that's, like, an actual common misprint that people really like, and that's just one of the beauties of playing in paper Magic. But you know, the VML is a online thing, but so many of our players are so involved in paper Magic as well, and it's just beautiful to see, like, people from the VML meeting in person and being a part of the online community, and it's one of my favorite things, because even just going to the NRG event, like, last weekend and having people who
Hmm.
are in the VML be like, "Oh my gosh, hi, you're here," and being like, "It's so great to, like,
Yeah.
finally meet you in person," has been, like, so amazing, and it's just
It,
like, thank you to everyone who is a part of our community for in any
and
way, shape, or
honestly,
form.
Becky, and you and I also did that at Digi
Yeah.
Vegas, and it was super sweet. We had our meetup, and like that's just what it's all about. It's I've had people message me being like, "I've spotted VML hoodies like in the wild on the street."
It makes me so
I'm like,
happy.
"Oh my goodness!"
I
You
designed
know?
that logo, it makes me so happy. Oh,
It's so sick. I love it so much. This community is great. Thank you to everybody for being a part of it. Um, and you do say the VML is an online league. Let's just say, and I don't want to give away anything too much, but let's just say that the VML is online focused for now. Ooh,
and with
yeah.
that, I won't put you on too much pressure,
Yeah,
but
with
are we
that,
ready to
let's
get
go
into
down
some
and
magic?
check out our first feature match of the day. We are going to division number 7, and it's AnnaJaneMTG. And Becky, we're actually welcoming Anna back to the VML because Anna participated, I believe, all the way back in season 1, in like
Mhm.
the very first season. And Anna was actually also sometime a member of the coverage team. I think back in seasons 1 and 2, we had Anna on coverage a couple of times as well. So welcome out to the VML, Anna. Really glad to see you here. And Anna has brought Dimir Control. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Tell me about Dimir Control.
Ooh,
I'm
I
here
mean,
for it.
this is like one of those archetypes that is kind of a very reactionary archetype, especially in the standard format right now. And Anna even mentions that in the questions that were asked this week. Anna did expect her opponent to bring Rakdos Sacrifice, is playing copies of a Null to like kind of handle that as
Oh.
well, and doing a lot of things that are reactionary to what Anna thought her opponent was going to be playing. And then she does mention like womp womp, like that wasn't actually the case, but like this is still like a fine deck. If your opponent is planning to play something aggressive and you're just playing a lot of removal, like a lot of the time that is just going to work out for you, and that could potentially be one of those moments. And I realized I made this slide and Google really wants Luris to be autocorrected to lupus.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even notice that,
I'm gonna
Becky.
I'm gonna like eat that one right now. That one's my bad. I was feeling
Is
really
this an
cute.
episode of House? Like,
I was
wow.
feeling really good for putting the
Does
like
that date me as a person? Like,
no,
do
absolutely
young
not.
people even know what house is? Okay, you know what?
I was feeling really good about like doing the like taco emoji, blushing smile
Mm-hmm.
emoji that Anna had included in her like response to my questions, and then totally forgot that Google sometimes auto corrects things that I don't want it to autocorrect, but that is supposed to be Luris. Um is
Lyris is everything that she wants to do in eternal formats. But yeah, you know what? That is so many people have said that. Like Lyris is
yes.
great, but also
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, I think inherently the problem is just like Luris in a way that can reliably be drawn or be brought into the hand, and also the way that, especially in modern, it interacts with some of the new incarnation cards that is bringing it to a place where people just like don't like it. Like Solitude has become such a mainstay of the modern format that the ability to just like bring Lurrus into your hand and then it is a white card to be pitched for Solitude. As somebody who's paid a lot of attention to the modern format in the last month, has been actually one of the more impactful ways that Lurrus has been a companion. And then just like where it is an actual like companion in like Grixis Death Shadow and the Orzhov Hammer decks, like it's just so amazing. And yeah.
Sorry. Like we're on the VML, right? We have to talk about Ravenous Squirrel.
We really do.
Because nobody should let Arya near any formats. Let's have a look at who Anna is going up against. Let's see, you know, she's brought Dimir control, and her opponent, Ariel, has brought mono white aggro. So it's going to be the classic, you know, red corner, more aggro, blue corner, control.
Yeah.
What do we think about this extension of the mono white deck? And I will say, Beky, in the last season of the VML, I played a lot of mono white almost by accident. Back when Faceless Haven was still legal.
Rest in peace, Faceless Haven.
Rest in peace, Faceless Haven. And the deck was great. Like this mono white aggro deck is kind of more of like a Taxes mid-rangey, you know, it can go fast, but it can also really do a lot of interesting interactive things. Tell me about the Wandering Emperor.
Oh, okay. So the Wandering Emperor is actually such a cool card because it does do the thing of like, I've likened the mono white aggro decks a lot to Death and Taxes in Legacy a lot right now. It has a potential to play an aggressive strategy much more than the Death and like, I would say that Death and Taxes is definitively in Legacy a control deck. But with the mono white aggro deck that is in Standard currently, I would say that it is definitively an aggro deck, but with like the reprinting of Thalia Guardian of Thraben, there are a lot of ways for this deck to also play like a control deck when it needs to, and the Wandering Emperor is a great example of that. It has a way to exile tapped creatures, it has a way to both make a token to just like keep itself protected. It is just like staple planeswalker card.
So good.
On top of that, it has flash. Wild. Absolutely insane.
I mean, let's just say, okay, here's my hot take. I think the Wandering Emperor is miles better than Gideon Ally of Zendikar.
Whoa, okay.
Well, that's
that is a hot take. That is a hot take. I need a lot of time to process
History will prove
that.
me right.
All right, we will certainly see. I think I personally would need a lot of time to process that. I think like a Anthem in the emblems section is just like so insanely strong, and that's what made Gideon Ally of Zendikar so good. But it does also fall into the like, it does cost 4, which is different than Gideon Ally of Zendikar, and no, it's the same. Okay,
let's go down to the match.
Yeah,
and
let's
find out
it's
the power of the Wandering Emperor. We are going to our Division 7 Week 3 match here from the VML. And if you have just joined us over from the main channel, welcome in. I hope you had a great time with everybody on the lovely coverage team watching the set championships. We are the VML. We are a league for people of marginalized genders. Every season, our winner goes to the set championship. And we have feature matches every week at this time, 6 p.m. Pacific on Friday, as we go down and have a look at what is going on in the match. AnnaJaneMTG with a pretty key card in the hand of the opener, Beky. Meathook Massacre hanging out there.
Oh, and does actually at least have lined up 2 swamps to be able to play it. So everything is kind of like seemingly lining up, and especially not having a turn 1 play here for Ariel is going to be extremely important for Anna here. Going for the turn 2 Luminarch Aspirant is like always a good option, but considering the amount of removal that is present in the Dimir control deck that Anna is piloting, you've got to be feeling pretty good going into your next few turns.
So Luminarch Aspirant does come down right on time on turn number 2, and since we are playing Standard here at the VML, gets its counter straight away as we go back over. And Anna just content to sit back right now, not looking to play out this Graveyard Trespasser just yet, Beky.
Yeah, this kind of is an interesting decision. I respect holding back on the Jawari disruption and just like waiting to see, is there a potential for me to actually play this as a counterspell, or is it strictly going to be a land? And in this instance, Anna is actually rewarded for this decision, counters the Elite Spellbinder, which is one of the better cards in this matchup against this Dimir control deck, but is now also punished because it's not able to play a land on this turn. So Kaito could be an option. Something like this Graveyard Trespasser is also an option. And it's now just like a little bit of a harder decision because this Luminarch Aspirant, the longer that it sits on the field, is also increasingly growing out of a way that this Meat Hook Massacre could ever deal with it.
And it does find a copy of Kaito, one of the new Planeswalkers, of course, from Neon Dynasty, and, might I say, the cool full art, alt art style of Kaito as well. It's going to come down, do a bit of looting, phase out, but unfortunately for Anna, no fourth land just yet. And as you say, this Luminarch Aspirant is going to be absolutely massive. Ariel's now found a couple of 1-drops as well to go along with that second Luminarch Aspirant in hand. Things looking pretty good for Mono White at this stage, Beky.
They really are. I mean, it's hard because it feels like it should be looking good for Anna in the Dimir control strategy in this point, strictly because of the Meat Hook Massacre that is in hand. But off of missing that fourth land drop, like time and time again, control just wants to play land go, whether they like it or not. Like that is usually the control
They like it.
strategy.
I can confirm.
Yeah,
As a control player, I can confirm.
So this is certainly a situation where Anna has to be feeling a little bit bad and has to be like, okay, I at least have this Kaito that's holding it down, but now missing this another land drop,
no.
just not where Dimir control wants to be. And like at least Graveyard Trespasser is going to be able to come onto the field and like potentially gain
block
life and do a little bit of blocking.
Block that much, right?
It really does
There's
not.
There's nothing really in the graveyard to eat, and like even that hopeful initiate is going to become a 3/4 next turn.
Oh, and even off of the activation from Kaito, not able to find a land finds instead of Siphon Insight. I like this decision to go ahead and say Syncopate, not nearly as impactful when my aggro opponent is drawing more lands than me as the control player, getting yeet that right out of the hand. I mean, this is just a hard place for the control deck to end up being in, and at least Siphon Insight is going to allow us to find a land. Thank goodness.
Steal one of our opponent's lands. We don't need lands in our deck. We can play that.
And both of these Luminarch Aspirants are going to go ahead and either make another Luminarch Aspirant bigger or the Hopeful Initiate, and then based on how big these Luminarch Aspirants are also going to add more counters to these Hopeful Initiates. Not even going to bother with Kaito because the life total matters more for this control deck. And now, even if Anna was able to draw a land on the next turn, like realistically, a Meat Hook Massacre for 3 is likely only going to kill 2 creatures, and based on the amount of damage that Anna is going to be taking this turn, is not really going to equate to enough to keep Anna in this game, barring some really good draws going to happen.
I have been in that spot many a time, Beky. It just, when you're sitting there as the control player and you just... And, Anna on turn 1 used I think it was a Consider, and actually surveilled a land into the bin. And I just, it's so brave to do that. And I get it, because you're playing against aggro, you feel like you need spells to counter all their threats. You need a density of answers for what they're doing, but just not drawing anything off the top to help her. And this game 1 looking like it's pretty wrapped up here for Ariel, but, that's why we play best of 3. There's always the sideboard.
And actually, being able to cast this Meat Hook Massacre and actually get rid of this Luminarch Aspirant, just a 3/4 is going to be remaining on the battlefield. As far as Anna is concerned, that's pretty good. Redain does at that mana cost. You're totally correct. Oh, yep, and Anna realizes it now too.
Incredibly heads up play there by Ariel. When you have this board, you have lethal. Just get that Redain down, just try and stop any possible thing that can take out your creatures, and that is exactly what Ariel has done here. Kaito still has a look, can still go looting for 1, but I'm not sure that there's any real single card here in Anna's deck that gets her out of this. this particular quandary.
I mean, we talked about it before this game even came in too. We were like, the mono white deck that is currently in standard does kind of play like a Taxes situation, especially when you're main decking something like Redain and when you're having things like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. Like, you have all of these really resilient ways to say, like, sure, you can go ahead and submit a control sort of style, but I've got a lot of things to combat that. And that is certainly true in this situation with this Redain in play.
So it's going to be Graveyard Trespasser. There was a creature to eat from the graveyard, so Anna's going to go back up to 6. We go over to Ariel, who has a Intrepid Adversary that can pump the team a couple of times, has Skyclave Apparition to remove one of these blockers, really just has all the options available. Just really a matter of deploying these threats, and yeah, right-click concede is about right here.
Yeah, as soon as that Cave of the Frost Dragon is also coming onto the field, not enough ways to handle those attackers. So this is one of those situations where, you know, that extra copy of Meathook Massacre, as well as that extra blocker from the curtain, are certainly good options to at least be able to save some life total amounts and also just like make Anna's life a little bit easier going into the next few rounds.
So we do just have to explain to all of our viewers who just came in. So because the way that the VML is structured, we are a weekly league. Every week you play against a different opponent in the kind of initial division stages of play. And because we publish the schedule of the whole league at the beginning, you know every single week who you're going to be playing against. And you know every single week what decks your opponent has submitted previously. So you will see a lot of players in the VML take risks, shall we say, by trying to metagame against what they believe their opponent is going to play. And that is actually one of the most interesting parts of playing the VML, and it's one of the parts that our players enjoy the most because they can get to do their sleuthing and you get to try and level each other. And that's why maybe some of you might be confused to see copies of a null in the main deck there for Anna. Clearly, you know, like a VML special, oh, I think my opponent's maybe played runes 2 weeks in a row and I want to counter that. Beky, do you think it's worth going for that kind of metagame call in the main deck?
As somebody who has both attempted going for the metagame calls and also just like mindlessly submitted the same deck weeks and weeks and weeks in a row, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And this is actually a funny situation where Ariel and Anna both anticipated their opponents playing the same decks going into this week, and they both changed decks. Ariel, actually, who is playing mono white here, was previously playing Rakdos Sacrifice, and Anna was, or one of them was previously on Runes, one of them was previously on Rakdos Sacrifice. They changed to these respective decks of either mono white or Dimir Control. So they both were playing different decks on previous weeks, switched to different decks this week, and in anticipation of what their opponents were going to play. And as a result, like, are playing some kind of weird cards in the main board, are kind of pre-boarded for what they thought their opponents were going to be playing, and are now, you know, here. And it's very interesting to see, because there's very few times in the VML where you do get to see people anticipating on both sides and then both being like, oh, this is maybe a little unfortunate. Yeah, but we both did the switch, and now we're in these unfortunate places as a result of it. But it's also kind of fun to see. Yeah, those annuls get taken down to the main board as a result. And, you know,
it's like you say. Yeah, it's like you say, Beky. I've definitely been on both sides of it as well. Like, some weeks I've been, you know, oh, my opponent's played mono green 3 times in a row. I'm going to just decide against mono green. It's going to be great. And they bring mono green and I feel like a genius. And then some weeks, and this has definitely happened to me, I've looked at my opponent who's played, you know, mono white for 6 weeks in a row, whatever, and I think, okay, there's no way they're going to switch to Izzet Epiphany in week 7 of a 7-week long week. No way.
Yeah. They always switch to Izzet Epiphany.
They always switch to Izzet Epiphany.
Yeah, I think the
The rule.
only time that I've, like, successfully just, like, brainlessly submitted the same deck over and over again and just been like, "I don't know, I feel confident on this deck, and confidence is all I need." Sultai Ultimatum. I just submitted that deck
Okay,
every
yeah.
single time, and I was like, "I just think that, like, I have a version of the deck that beats whatever my opponent is gonna bring," and that's the only time that it has actually worked out for me. Every other time, I've been like, "Oh, I wish I would have actually looked at what my opponent had submitted previously and actually, like, kinda gamed for that."
All right, so we are gonna go down to game number two.
Ooh.
Ariel just has to win this one to get, move on in the league with a victory here, whereas Anna has to claw it back from a game down. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. We were talking about the death and taxes feel of this particular iteration of Mono White earlier, Beky, and
Mhm.
Thalia on turn two is a sight that many Magic players will be familiar with.
Oh, yeah, and an extremely potent one at that. I mean, Thalia is a card that I was annoyed with in Modern for a long time, is certainly
Yep.
not something that I wanna see against a lot of the decks that I play, and is certainly one that is extremely potent right now in Standard as well. Does not get through this 0-4, so at least Anna has that to work with here, but also has a lot more lands to deal with in this game, and having this 0-4 in this game too is got to be such a like wiping some sweat
So
off the
nice.
brow,
Look,
is going to be able to save some of the life total, make some of these land go kind of plays, and just be in a good spot for the rest of this game, hopefully.
so nice. I mean, you, especially faced with a Thalia, right? Like, you get to pay 1 mana for your 0-4, and obviously it doesn't look like a lot right now, but that's going to become a 3-4 later on. It's going to take a card out of Ariel's hand, and unlike in game number one, AnnaJaneMTG working with all of the lands that she needs, and with plenty of card selection in hand as well, already had to consider played, can cast the second one here and really set up for the middle stages of this game. We see Luminarch Aspirant come down post combat for Ariel, as well as an Usher of the Fallen.
This is actually a great way for Ariel to combat how Anna has started off this game. Being able to go wide with a bunch of small creatures is certainly good for the time being for how Anna has started off. And like Ariel also probably has to be, like, a little bit concerned, like, "Sure, I can go for this go wide strategy, but what if, like, a Meat Hook Massacre is one of the 5 cards in Anna's hand?" Like, that
Mm.
certainly isn't where you want to be, but now Anna is gonna be the one with more information going forward, is able to take a peek at Ariel's hand here with the Revealing Eye, and is gonna go ahead and make sure that, like, "Sure, you can have 2 copies of the Wandering Emperor, I don't care, that costs more for you because of your Thalia, so let's go
Mm.
ahead and say that that's fine."
Yeah, exactly. That is the problem with Dahlia. The effect is symmetrical, and it's Anna is not going to be attacking with this concealing curtains anytime soon. So Wandering Emperor's removal mode not going to be super relevant for Ariel. Can start distributing counters should they find another land in the next turn or two. But for now, it's going to be Intrepid Adversary, put a counter on Thalia, and we're going to see Ariel get in finally for a bit of damage here, taking Anna down to 16. And Anna finds a copy of Hive of the Eye Tyrant with the awesome D&D kind of retro book cover art.
That's
Is
one
that
of
a
the
copy of Professor Onyx in hand?
Yes, it is, and
Oh
I'm
my god,
very
Beky. I
excited to
really,
see it.
yeah, the two of us are just sat here like, please, let's get to the Professor Onyx stage of this match.
Let's. I mean, yeah, sure. Graveyard Trespasser can come down. We can do some blocking with this Revealing Eye. Like, sure, go ahead, do it. But like, as soon as we can get to the Professor Onyx point, like, it's not going to be as good as like Liliana Dreadhorde General, which would have been like
Mm.
amazing in this standard. Like, being able to like say sacrifice 2 creatures on both sides would be like so amazing. Professor Onyx, not quite with that same potency, and we do have to get through an extra turn, considering that there is also a Thalia Guardian of Thraben in play, but like, should Anna get to that point and like is still at a relatively high life total, again, thanks to this Revealing Eye and Concealing Curtain, is in a pretty
Mhm.
good spot. The amount of lands that are being drawn, like, are good for a certain facet of the deck, but are probably, like this is a point in the game where Anna wishes that every single card that was being drawn off the top was something like a Meat Hook Massacre or something to get rid of the creatures that are on the board.
Well, Takamono, these new channel lands from Neon Dynasty do go a long way to addressing the problem you're talking about, Becky, because they come in untapped, so that it's just essentially free, right? Like, unless you need a lot of land types or whatever it is in your deck, it's essentially free to play these lands. And when you're flooding out, exactly as Anna's going to be doing here, mill a couple of cards, get something back from the graveyard, has quite a few options to choose from. What do you like here? Looks like it's going to be Graveyard Trespasser.
Yeah, I think going for the Graveyard Trespasser is just, like, the safest option. It's something that gains life. It's something that, like, if your mono white opponent for some reason has nothing to do on a turn is gonna get bigger. It's just the safest option, but I do think that the Thieving Skydiver is another, like, thing that Anna had in her deck to kinda combat what she thought Ariel was going to be playing going into this week, and so it's, like, a very cool card that just, like, unfortunately couldn't come out of the deck. You gotta be playing some blockers to be able to handle this mono white strategy. Cool card, not good in this situation, but it's still exciting to see nonetheless.
You know what I like to see? I
Oh.
like to see Syncopate counter things.
Oh.
It's so sweet. Let's go. Get that Wandering Emperor out of here. But, we know, and Anna knows as well, there is a second copy of Wandering Emperor in hand for Ariel that has been joined by another Luminarch Aspirant. Ariel's so good at drawing these Luminarch Aspirants, plus Usher of the Fallen as well. And Ariel really has to decide whether to play out into a potential Meat Hook Massacre or not. Looks like it's just going to be keep coming in with the Thalia for now, with the first striking threat. And Beky, at some point, you have to imagine some chump blocks are going to have to be thrown here.
Yeah, at some point, it's just hard to tell exactly when that's gonna be. Like, 5 isn't that low of a life total, but also with the amount of, like, ability to go wide this mono white deck can have. I mean, Anna has
It's
to have tried this
scary.
matchup at least a little bit. So Anna has to have a good understanding of exactly how that is, but does know that, like, one of the cards in Anna's hand is essentially dead. It's a land. It's not going to be doing anything against the cards that are currently in play. This Thalia is only going to get scarier, but even if we, like, double blocked here, like, it's going to kill the Thalia, but, like, the situation is still going to be a dire one. So this is just a really hard situation to end up being in, and when you don't know the other 2 cards in the mono white hand, like, there could be something like a Valorous Stance, which would have been absolutely horrible to run into it for Anna, so that's why we see something like this singular block and just preserving Anna's life total at 10 here.
Well, Beky, I think you and I are going to get our wish. Might be
a Professor game?
Professor Onyx time coming up. And it just draws another Syncopate off the top, which is not what you want to see at this stage of the game if you're in that Dimir control seat.
No, you want to just be able to play Professor Onyx and not worry about the other card in your hand.
Looks like Anna's actually not going to play the Professor Onyx right now. He's holding up the Syncopate for that second Wandering Emperor that she knows about. There is a Hive of the Eye Tyrant on the battlefield, so that could represent another blocker here for AnnaJaneMTG. But Ariel, finding multiple Luminarch Aspirants, decides to just take to the skies. That is a huge Cave of the Frost Dragon.
Oh, that's a nice way to do this too. Knowing the first strike and the flying are good, like, quote unquote evasive. One of them is really the only evasive strategy in this, but first strike, like, basically says, like, whatever blocker you want to bring to the board isn't going to be able to get through Thalia. So Anna is kind of forced in this situation to take 5 and be left in just a worse and worse situation as this progresses.
Yeah, and that is going to do it. Not a Meat Hook Massacre. We see AnnaJaneMTG scooping it up. And that is going to do it. Ariel with mono white aggro taking that one down 2-0. Beky, are you surprised to see mono white aggro really, like, sweep that control matchup?
I mean, if you've been watching Magic stream and you've been watching Alchemy, you know that mono white is also just a very strong strategy in that format as well, and it's not
Mhm.
really a surprise that it's also very potent in standard right now. It has a lot of the same cards, it has a lot of the same strategies, it's doing a lot of the same thing, and those taxing effects are just making it mono white has never previously, like when we were seeing like the mono white strategies from like Rivals of Ixalan, they didn't have a lot of those same ways to combat
Yeah.
a lot. That's like the first one that came to mind. I'm just like thinking
No,
of
no,
like
you're
Andrew
right. I
Allen
was also
Bogan playing
thinking of
mono
that type.
white and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so they haven't like had a lot of ways to as strongly combat control strategies as it does right now, and as we got to see in that game as a beautiful example of having something like the Dane in the first game and Thalia in the next game to just make it so inconvenient for control to do its typical strategy. So can I say that I'm surprised? Not really. I think that the mono white deck is one of the strongest strategies currently, and something that a lot of people are kind of like being like, oh, I don't really want to play an aggro deck, but it's not really. I mean, it is an
It's
aggro
not
deck, but
really
it
an
is
aggro deck.
such
I mean,
a
it is.
well-equipped one.
I mean, it is an aggro deck, right? Like that. It's playing 8/1 drops. We do have to describe it as an aggro deck, but and I like I said, like I played it quite a lot last season. Rip, Faceless Haven, etc. And the like my favorite matchup to play was the mirror, because you just got to play the control side of it. You could play up to 8 Fiend Hunter effects. Like you could play 4 Skyclave Apparition, 4 Brutal Cathar. And my absolute favorite thing was you just play Brutal Cathar, take a thing out, next turn, pass the turn, like don't do anything. And then you're like, okay, opponent, you have to either play 1 spell at a time for the rest of the game, or I'm just gonna go off with this Brutal Cathar. So absolutely, the mono white deck did have a setback with the loss of its snow lands, but Wandering Emperor in, and we are seeing it do work here in standard in Division 7 for Ariel. And if we go on to our next feature match of the evening, we may get to see a little bit more of this deck in action. First of all, though, it's going to be Skye from Division number 1, and Skye is bringing Naya runes. So, Beky, tell us a little bit about this Naya runes deck.
I mean, it's basically revolving around those 4 creatures that you're kind of seeing at the forefront. The Generous Visitor, Jukai Naturalist, Kami of Transience, and Runeforge Champion. Those 4 creatures are pretty much enough for you to say, I'm playing a lot of getting extra power and toughness off of my runes. Runes were kind of like pretty much thought of as a strictly draft strategy during Kaldheim Limited, and now it's great to see them all of a sudden kind of like spring to the forefront of standard. I think they're absolutely beautiful. You accompany that with the kind of quote unquote combo of Runeforge Champion and Jukai Naturalist, and you can basically play a bunch of runes for free, and you're freely drawing cards, adding these effects to your creatures.
It's a combo.
It's a combo. I say quote unquote combo.
Quote unquote.
When I say combo, I usually like think of like wins the game. Like this combo wins the game. This doesn't win the game, but it does put you in a really good place. And I think that like standard, okay, so like looking at, again, if you came from the Magic stream and you saw alchemy, Naya Runes is not the best strategy in alchemy. It has a really bad win rate. It's had a really bad showing in alchemy. It is an extremely strong strategy in the standard format because the answers to it are just so much worse in standard right now. So that's why we keep seeing it be such a forefront of the standard format. And so it just has a really nice way of drawing a bunch of cards, a lot of cards that work very synergistically together, but is kind of weak to removal. And as long as people are not playing a ton of removal in their decks, is still going to be a strong strategy going forward.
All right, well, let's have a look at Skye's opponent's deck list. So for week number 3, we have Diidadaa from Division 1 as well, and she has brought mono white aggro, and I think a pretty similar list, Beky, to the one that we saw just now with Ariel playing. Not a lot to say, I think, about this build, except how do you think these two decks match up against each other? Because we did talk about mono white being able to answer these creature matchups with the likes of Brutal Cathar, that you've put as a card to watch there, with likes of the Wandering Emperor as well. But in this kind of go big versus go wide, if we can put it that way.
No, that's a good way to put it.
What how do you think the matches play out?
It's hard because I feel like, Diidada's opponent isn't playing as many copies of, Rune of Sustenance, which would give lifelink, which would be extremely great in this matchup, but Jukai Naturalist does have lifelink built into it, so if something like a Jukai Naturalist is the creature that is being suited up by all of the runes, we could still be left in a great place. However, Brutal Cathar does fight that very well, Fateful Absence does fight that very well, so it's really just going to ultimately, I feel like in this matchup, I feel like this is a very good, very fun matchup to have ended up in a standard format where it is simply going to depend on what part of the deck is drawn for both of these players, but it is mainly going to be watching the mono white aggro version and which cards are found for that deck going into this matchup.
All right, let's go down to the action. We have our week number 3 feature match from Division 1, I think I said. And we are going to be watching this one just from the point of view of Skye, who opens up with Jukai Naturalist, 2 runes of speed and a rune of sustenance, and right on time finds the white mana for Jukai Naturalist.
I mean, very nice to see that white mana. This would have been like a hand, as somebody who's played the Naya runes deck a little bit through the standard format, would have been a little shaky. I don't like keeping hands that have red mana but don't have white mana or green mana because you're playing a lot more copies of white and green cards where you just like, you need to play your Jukai Naturalist, you need to play your Kamiya Transients, you need to play your Runeforge Champion because that is what the deck revolves around. And then Rune of Speed is just like a nice little cherry on top that you get to play because having haste in some of the controlling matchups is very important.
So we'd see a pretty cool card that Skye drew as well. Michiko's Reign of Truth, which if you, like me, have been spending your entire time playing Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Limited, which one of the best limited formats of, I think, recent years, if not ever, you will know that this card can be extremely powerful.
Oh, indeed. And I mean, like, that's one of the things that Skye is playing differently from a lot of the other Naya Rune strategies currently, is playing these 4 copies of Michiko's Reign of Truth. So that is such a strong card to have in the deck that is made cheaper by the 4 copies of Jukai Naturalist. So I like kind of that adaptation for playing one of these sagas that is extremely strong alongside the rest of this suite of runes that Skye is playing.
So Skye did get that Jukai Naturalist removed by Fateful Absence from the mono white player Diidadaa, but found a generous visitor, and now those counters are going to start stacking up. And speaking of counters stacking up, we are going to see Luminarch Aspirin put a counter on that Usher, which is now 4-3. Hopeful Initiate gets the training trigger as well. And that's going to do it. Is Runeforge Champion not going to be good enough here for Skye, who just fell behind on board in this game at number 1? And we are heading to the sideboard already.
Yeah, that was a rough situation because, like, even though having something as important as the Runeforge Champion is in that hand, Thalia had just come down. And Runeforge Champion doesn't really have that great of an effect once a Thalia Guardian of Thraben is on the board. Like, makes everything cost 2 again. Not really where you want to be.
Right. Okay, so this hand is also, you know, kind of a little bit land heavy here for Skye, but does have that Boseiju, like one of these new channel lands we were talking about in the previous matchup. And Boseiju could actually come in handy here because we know, of course, that the mono white deck does play some copies of Portable Hole. So we could potentially see Boseiju do a little bit of work here for Skye, and Runeforge Champion, of course, a key part of the engine for this Naya Runes deck.
Oh, Circle of Containment also very good to have in this matchup, and certainly one of the things that we saw Skye go ahead and sideboard. So that's a great thing to have drawn here, and would make me, if I was the one playing this Naya Runes deck, feel a little bit better about the course of this game, because this is one of those hands where it's like, you can't really mulligan it. Like, it is a fine hand, and it, like, especially having something like Runeforge Champion that's basically drawing you a card. You have the Rune of Might, which is also drawing you a card. Like, you're gonna have a lot of ways to filter and get more cards. So, like, having the lands to go alongside it is not the worst. but it's just like a series of like, I have to keep this hand because like a 6 just isn't going to be as potent, but
Oh.
this is where it gets punished.
Oh, okay. Brutal Kappa comes down, takes care of Runeforge Champion for now, and now Sonic really has to think about what to do with this circle of confinement because, you know, I think before Brutal Kappa came down, you would 100% have said you just need to get rid of this Thalia, right? Get the train
Yes.
going with these runes. But now the temptation has got to be to do exactly this, get that rune for champion back, search for another rune from the library. But all of these runes, I mean, even with that discount from Runeforge Champion, are going to cost 2. So Skye is actually in a position where she really needs things to go well in the next turn or two and could potentially then start clawing it back. But, you know, any piece of interaction from the mono white deck would throw a massive wrench in these works.
And I mean, that's kind of just one of the downfalls of this Naya runes deck. Exactly what you just said. One piece of interaction just starts to make the whole train just like fall off of its wheels. And I mean, I think that's a lot of like what we saw in Alchemy today and where the Naya runes deck is really just like faltering. Like, yes, it is a strong strategy, but it is a strong strategy relying on you having some form of protection, something like Karametra's Blessing, something like Tamio's Blessing in Standard, ways to keep your creatures safe. And if you're not able to keep those creatures safe and you're just like suiting something up with like 3 enchantments and just hoping to have this glass cannon, it's just not going to be the case a lot of the time. And, you know, thankfully Skye is having some of these reactionary things in Eiganjo Seed of the Empire to handle the onslaught of damage that is slowly coming across the table. Because otherwise, this is just like slowly starting to be like you're going just wide enough that this runes deck is not going to be able to handle it very well.
Things have gone pretty well though for Skye in this particular turn cycle. Was able to use Channel on a Ganjo to take out the attacking Thalia. And we are going to see now the combination has been assembled. Jukai Naturalist plus Runeforge Champion means that all of these runes are going to be able to be played out for free. And
Chef's kiss.
Cammy of Transient is going to be absolutely massive. It has haste. Michiko's Reign of Truth can come down as well. I dread to think how big this Cammy is going to be.
Woo!
That is a 15-14 Cammy of Transient that came out of absolutely nowhere. And that just goes to show this is why this deck is popular. This is why people play it, because you can just have these turns that come out of nowhere. And what are you going to do if you're Diidadaa? Just got to take it.
You're taking it. And then all of a sudden, Skye gaining 15. This is where exactly, like, as I mentioned, this Rune of Sustenance makes such a big impact in this matchup. If it is one of the first things that you go for, this is going to be really unfortunate. And it is extremely good draw here. Either it was a draw or the land to play the Wandering Emperor was the draw for Diidadaa here. And being able to just say, all right, you know, you suited up that Kami. Let's throw it into the exile zone. No, thank you. I'm trying to be in the driver's seat of this game, but still, Diidadaa is at 7 life, and that is certainly going to be a little bit of a difficulty going forward. And Skye, like, sure, it's going to take a little bit of damage here, but it's also going to gain some life and is still at 26, which, all things considered, is not really what you want to be staring down as a mono white player.
Even attack, you got to, right?
Yeah, wow. I mean, what are you afraid of? Like, a mono white deck in one turn is certainly not going to be doing 26 damage, and especially if you're able to gain another 5, go to 31 here. Like, Skye is just in such a good position in this game.
Yeah, there's a layer of the Hydra as well that Skye has played out. Michiko's Reign of Truth is going to flip. It's not going to be as big as, you know, you would like it to be if you had 3 or 4 of those runes still on the battlefield, but it's still going to at least start out as a 3/3 and then can only get bigger from there. Skye, though, has used up all of her resources. Fateful Absence is going to take care of Naturalist, give Skye a card to look at. But now Diidadaa is, and this is a weird thing to say about mono white, but maybe has stabilized and turned the corner here if Skye doesn't find anything, you know, in the next couple of turns.
Yeah, so this is really interesting because if Diidadaa goes ahead and attacks with everything here, uh, first of all, I'm surprised because I would, as any player, this is certainly a situation where if I'm Diidadaa, you're fighting with yourself. You're like, do I go ahead and say, okay, you have two cards in hand, and I'm just hoping that one of them isn't a haste rune? I'm gonna go ahead
Right.
and hope that because if it
Oh
is,
my goodness.
speaking of a rune of speed,
Yeah.
luckily, for Diidadaa, like no creatures in play. This is gonna flip
Mm.
into one, and there is gonna be
Oh my
some
goodness.
hasteness, but like at least Adeline has vigilance and is going to be able to
That's
block.
true.
Like,
But you're essentially committing to, even without these runes being drawn, you're kind of committing to chump blocking with Adeline, which I get it. Okay, you have a Wandering Emperor, maybe it's enough to do that, but it's definitely a risky line. If Skye had any piece of
ooh.
interaction, we would be looking at a very different game. And there's going to be Rune of Might that gives
Ooh.
trample, very
No,
key.
this is working out very nicely.
Ability here, and yeah, here we go. That is going to do it.
Right.
So Skye with Naya runes taking down game number 2 against mono white aggro. We're going to look at the sideboard once again between games and see no changes for the decider here.
Yeah, we did see Skye. The 2 copies of Paladin class that are now in the main board were sideboard cards. So that is an interesting thing to have seen, like, just the added life gain was enough to warrant bringing something like that in. Oh, this is also an interesting keep from Skye that would worry me a little bit, but at least having 2 creatures now off this Kami of Transience draw makes me feel a little bit safer, but Usher the Fallen is a good start for Diidadaa.
Usher of the Fallen's very nice. Skye is breathing a sigh of relief, I can tell you right now, that there was no Luminarch Aspirant to follow it up with. I think in this spot, if you've kept a kind of a slow hand, right? And if you see your opponent go Usher on 1, Luminarch Aspirant on 2, it's not over, but it's like you feel bad about it for sure. Now Skye gets to go Cameo Transients, put a counter on next turn with Jukai Naturalist, potentially play Showdown of the Skulls in the next couple of turns as well. Was there a temptation here, Beky, for you to just play Naturalist and just Showdown on turn number 3?
Oh, yeah, especially considering the amount of lands that were initially kept in hand. I would want to be seeing as many cards off the top as possible. The only thing that I think like maybe Skye considered, and the reason that this Kami of Transients was the play instead, is because of the Usher of the Fallen. Like if there hadn't been a 1-drop, I go for the Jukai Naturalist into Showdown of the Scalds every single time. But because there was a 1-drop and it is specifically Usher of the Fallen that again has this ability that we just saw Diidadaa use to go ahead and boast and continue to go wide, that would make me have some concerns for my life total, and hence why I do think that Skye did make the right play by going of Kami of Transients into Jukai Naturalist.
Okay, so Cameo of Transients, that's gonna grow to a 3/3. Gonna get frisky. And Jukai Naturalist sitting back with the lifelink ability on it as well, ready to maybe see some showdown action next turn. Oh, and that is brutal. Katha is so brutal here for
literally in the name.
It's just a brutal card. Whoever named Brutal Katha, props. Give that person a raise.
Knew what it was gonna be doing in standard.
Just knew. Yeah. And then Runeforge Champion, and if that Naturalist had been on the battlefield, this would have been an incredible rip off the top for Skye.
Nonetheless, actually, just being able to go ahead, play this Rune of Sustenance, get a little bit of extra damage going across, and gain some life, like this isn't all that bad for Skye, barring like I'm trying to think of like what the worst case scenarios are, like land Intrepid Adversary coming off of the top for Diidadaa here, and then that would like just buff up what is happening for Diidadaa so good. Portable Hole, also certainly not good, like not being able to repeatedly gain life is not the best if you're Skye, but like you have still these 2 Kami of Transients in play, so like there's still some things that can happen to combat what is happening on the board currently.
And sometimes you just need a 2/3. Right? Sometimes it's just
you said it beautifully.
Has 2 1s, they have 2 2s, they have a 2/3, and 1, 2, 3 is just going to hold down the board here for Skye, who gets to untap, finds another Runeforge champion. So it's going to be double Cammy this turn, which is not possible because of the mana base. So it's going to be Cammy into Runeforge champion. Better get that Rune of Sustenance out of the graveyard again, because you would like to draw more runes, of course, off your Showdown of the Skulls. And once again, we're kind of in a spot where Skye just needs to untap with all of this stuff available to happen, and we can maybe see an explosive turn like we did in the previous game, Beky.
This is like, at this point in the game, with both of these players at 13 and 13, is exactly kind of what I would expect from this matchup. Like the matchup of, I suit up one thing and it's like low-key Bogles, and I just like am trying to go big or go home, and then Diidada's mono white deck is saying, okay, I'm gonna go wide or go home. Like this is exactly where I would want this matchup to be as it is currently, and this is the part that's like kind of making me bite down my nails to the quick for both players here.
It's gonna be attacking from both of those ushers who have been pumped thanks to that intrepid adversary. Beseiju, who endures, that could maybe do something for the portable hole later on. That is Lair of the Hydra. So Skye has to kind of decide here whether to go for this Showdown. Showdown would put another counter on that Cammy. Make a 4-power lifelink attacker or blocker.
Yeah, this is a hard situation. So I don't think we played a land, so I think the hope is find a land, play one of these runes, which was going to be my other like ideals, and then continue to pump up this Kami. I would have put it on the lifelink attacker and just try to gain some life back, but again, I haven't done the damage of how much damage we're taking back, so the potential could just be like, okay, I do like this as somebody who didn't do the attacker math.
Making a 3/4. Yeah. Making a 3/4 and a 5/5 makes a lot of sense if you just look at the raw numbers. You know, them and
as big a blockers as possible is certainly preferable in this situation when Skye is on the back foot.
Oh my goodness. It's Brutal Kappa again. Take out the life linker, of course, and now is this lethal?
I think so. I think it is. Has to be. Yeah, if we just attack with everything,
if Diida just sends with everybody, there is no way that. Oh no.
Ooh.
Okay. All right. So
playing it safe. I can appreciate a play safe, but
I will say I was looking at Diidada's slide earlier, and this competitor, massive props to her, started Magic 6 months ago.
Yes.
And just said, you know what? I'm just going to enter a competitive league because I love this game. That is what it's all about. Love to see that here. And Skye does get to untap though. Put some runes on that Runeforge champion. Showdown of the Skulls doing its thing. Making counters. There's a Jukai Naturalist, which should gain a little bit of life for Skye.
Alright, Runeforge champion number 2, gonna allow to find another rune which can suit up the first Runeforge champion, which is got a lot of power and toughness to get life.
That is a lot of power and toughness. If Skye finds a Machika's Reign of Truth here, it's close to over, I think. Unfortunately, just finds a handful of land, so that is not what Skye was looking for necessarily. Does have a huge attack with this Runeforge champion if Skye wants to do so.
Ooh, and it is a lethal attack, so it does need to be blocked by something.
Does it have a Rune of Might on it?
Does have a Rune of Might, so it does have Trample. Okay,
does have Trample, so this is gonna have to be a reasonably big block here, and it's gonna be okay. So the 2/2 that's gonna soak up 2 damage. So this is currently 11 coming through. I respect it. Go down to 2.
I mean, barring something like a Brutal Cathar, again, for Diidadaa to be able to take away one of these creatures, like, I mean, also, like, has this Cave of the Frost. So could
Dragon.
potentially go ahead, but even still, like 15, that was a lot of life to gain.
That was a lot. That was a lot of life to gain. So for Diidadaa now, when you're in this spot, right? Like, and we've all been there, we've all missed lethal, we've all sat there thinking, you know, pressuring ourselves, how can we get out of this? Beky, what's your advice for any players finding themselves in this situation?
At least take a moment to learn from it. It's always hard because yeah, we do this back and forth, and like now, especially that these brutal Cathars have flipped, have first strike, certainly is making things a lot more difficult for Skye on this end as well. And it's one of those things, like, again, you mentioned it, we all have missed lethal. It's also hard when it's like something that is going to be streamed, or if you are a streamer, like you've run into a lot of those situations where you're put into a place where you like wouldn't have ever even thought of it, and all of a sudden everyone's like, you miss lethal. Like, it happens to the best of us, it happens to the worst of us even. And so it's one of those situations where you just have to go ahead, move forward, and just be like, oh, how do I learn from this exact situation and make sure that it doesn't happen to me again? And that's like, in Magic, all you can do going forward. As we mentioned, like Diidadaa is a player who started playing 6 months ago and is still like doing a lot of very difficult game actions that most people don't do on average. So it's still like a very impressive player that we're seeing here.
Absolutely. And this, though, is a very impressive card for Skye to find off the top, because Circle of Confinement comes down, puts counters on those camis, including that one that was freed from the portable hole at the end step there with Boseiju, and we're going to see this layer of the Hydra be fired up now. And with those 3 power attackers with Trample, this is going to be 6 attackers to 4 blockers. Diidadaa is at 2 life, not a lot that she can do, and just has to take it here. So Skye taking this one down 2 games to 1 in a nail biter of a game 3 there. Great play that from Skye in Division 1. Wow, Beky, you know, you caught it right. You said that this was what the matchup would look like, and it was.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's played that matchup, like, it just ends up being like, what side of your deck do you see? And it was certainly looking really good for Diidadaa in that game. Also, like, finding 2 brutal Cathars is usually like exactly what the mono white deck needs to see in that matchup. And you know, sometimes like you also just see what you need from the Naya runes deck. You see the parts of your deck that make you really resilient to removal. You see those things that equalize yourself on card draw. And that's exactly what Skye was able to see in that game, and so is the one who takes down that match.
Wow. Great stuff there from our feature match players in Division number 1. Should we, Beky, watch some more Magic?
I mean, that's what we're here to do, yeah?
Oh, really? Is
yeah.
That what we're here to do? I thought we were
no,
here
we're
to...
just here to talk
here to discuss, like, Good Luck High Five and NRG Series, our awesome sponsors, without whom the VML would not be possible. And of course, massive shout out to Wizards of the Coast, who are also a huge supporter of the VML, and thank you so much to them for making everything available to us, the invites, the support, and we massively indebted to all of the people that you see at the bottom of the screen. So check out all of their content, check out the set championships, of course, check out NRG series. You will see Beky, my awesome co-host, on the NRG casting team, covering all of their tournaments as well. Beky, I believe you have one coming up tomorrow, is that right?
Yeah, in case somebody also, for some reason, like, we got 1,000 viewers. Somebody in chat, if you were interested in alchemy that you saw in Neon Dynasty Set Championship today, and you're like, that list looks sick, I can bring it into a tournament tomorrow and get myself an invite to the next Set Championship as well. NRG Series, go look them up on MTG Melee, are hosting an alchemy tournament tomorrow that I will also be casting. You can go ahead, enter yourself in that, and get yourself a chance to earn yourself an invite to the next Set Championship.
I will say, and we won't spend that much time talking about how much I love Shota Yasuoka, but I am so excited because I was watching the set championship this morning, and Shota Yasuoka, who is like one of the most revered, pros, one of the people that if you ask any Magic pro, who do you think is one of the best Magic players, Shota comes up in that conversation a lot. And when I started playing Magic, when I started competing in Magic, when I started watching Pro Tour coverage, I would watch Shota play these control mirrors and just absolutely dominate his opponent. And I can tell you this morning, when I saw that Shota Yasuoka was 3-0 with Is It Mill in Alchemy, I'm just so excited. Beky, have you seen this Is It Mill deck?
Oh, I've seen it. I also have lost to the standard version of it last week in the VML.
Oh no. Oh, okay. All right. So maybe now we know where Shota gets his deck list from. That's all I'm saying.
It's obviously.
For those of you who don't know this Is It Mill list, it plays Tasha's Hideous Laughter copied with Galvanic Iteration, which is like the main combo way.
Which are also both still standard cards.
Both still
for those of you wondering.
Indeed, but what it has added from Neon Dynasty is 4 copies of Invoke Calamity, the red Invoke, and that is just so sweet. Like, just in my mind, I'm just like, okay, well, I just want to Galvanic, copy and Invoke, use the Invoke to play the Galvanic. Oh my god, it's just insane. Anyway, we digress.
Anyway,
back to the VML, where we are in week 3 of division play. Let's have a look at division number 3 now, and we see Chantelle Campbell, who is a veteran on the VML scene, as well as in the, I would say, worldwide and North American GP/PTQ scene as well. We have seen Chantelle play many a tournament, and Chantelle has brought Boros Aggro, which is kind of a play, Beky, on this mono white list, but adding a bit of red.
Oh yeah, and I mean, like, I like this strategy. I mean, it's kind of been one of those strategies for like a long time. Like, you play a mono white aggro deck and you're like, what makes it better? If I add some red cards. If you're playing a mono red aggro deck, you're like, what makes this better? Maybe making my creatures indestructible or giving them protection, so I'm going to add some white. Like, the 2 colors that work the best in an aggro strategy, like time and time again, like most reliably through Standard's history and through just like Magic's history in general, red, white. So beautiful to see this, and beautiful to see this iteration in Standard currently.
Let's have a look at what the matchup is, and on the other side we have TheNerdySteve, who is a newcomer to the VML. Massive welcome to Steve to the VML, and Steve is playing against Chantelle, and Steve has brought mono white aggro, so it's gonna be aggro here in division number 3, Beky. And Steve started out with a 2-0 record already, looking to stay undefeated. How do you feel about mono-colored aggro versus 2-color aggro?
Normally, I would say that the 2-color aggro deck has a slight step up. However, the cards that are being played in the Boros version that Chantelle is playing don't play super nice with a lot of these taxing strategies that we've had a great time mentioning from the mono white standpoint. So I'm very interested to see how this Ward 1-drop, along with Thalia Guardian of Thraben, along with things like if there are copies of Ordain in Steve's deck, play into how this is going to exactly go. And I mean, this is going to be a lot like the matchup that we just watched, where it is both of these decks with very linear game plans trying to combat one another, or basically pass like 2 ships in the night and just see who can go fastest. And I'm interested to see which one that's going to be.
All right, well, let's go down to the feature match area and find out who is going to come out on top in this battle in Division 3. And having a look at the opening hands, both players with nice creatures to work with. Chantelle has Hopeful Initiate, Aspirin, Adeline, Redain, and Kumano faces Kazakhan, one of the reasons to play red in this deck. And Steve has taken a mulligan, but has the double Luminarch Aspirin start. So, Beky, I have a prediction, and that prediction is we are going to see a lot of +1/+1 counters in the near future. on both sides.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, yeah, from both sides is certainly going to be the case here. And oof, this is a part where I think that Chantelle's deck might have a little bit of a weaker stance in this exact. And it's so hard because you want to be playing things like this Den of the Bugbear. Like it's a big reason to be. It's such a great aggro card for a
Mm.
deck. But this is the exact place where it is maybe not the most ideal. It was drawn on the next turn, so wasn't able to be used to cast the Kakazan card, and now is just like gonna enter as a tap land, is not gonna allow us to cast Adeline, is not gonna allow us to cast Redain, and that's just like one of those places where maybe this 2-color in this
Mm.
specific standard right now is not the best.
This is a great attack in from Steve, by the way.
Oh yeah.
The bet that Chantal's not going to want to trade the Luminite Aspirant that's, technically a turn ahead, quote unquote, because of that counter from the Saga. And Chantelle sat there, has found the third white land. Adeline is out of commission for now. It's going to be Fateful Absence to take care of the opposing Luminarch Aspirant, and, well...
Ooh.
Red creatures go fast, Beky.
They do go fast. This is one of the few Saga creatures that does have the ability to immediately flip and still attack. And I like that it's saying, you know what, you have a flyer, sure. But if I attack, like, what are you going to do? So I like this play from Chantelle in this situation. And I mean, this is kind of what I was saying. When you're playing like aggro versus aggro deck, sometimes your decks are just going to be like, okay, we're 2 ships passing in the night, and all of a sudden we're both at 13. We've both got some creatures on the field. We're both starting to function on our own axes. And which one is going to end up coming out the victor? Like, you really don't know until you're both at like sub 15 life total. Some things are on the board and things are starting to get scrappy.
So we are going to see Redain be deployed by Chantelle here, and something that Chantelle could do is put this counter on the Redain, which means that it blocks that Luminarch, that Elite Spellbinder on the other side, while still allowing the 4/4 Luminarch Aspirant to attack. Steve is down to 9 from that, finds a land for the turn, and is just working with another copy of Luminarch Aspirant and a Guardian of Faith. So, Beky, Guardian of Faith is usually a card that we think about as anti-control, right? Like, usually you're thinking, okay, if my opponent has a sweeper, they have Meat Hook Massacre, whatever it is, I can flash out this Guardian of Faith and save my creatures. What role does it fulfill in this kind of aggro mirror?
I have to imagine that it is like going for something like doing a bunch of blocks and then phasing out so that your creatures have an ability to survive through a combat, and kind of go for like, I don't want to say like cheeky, because like a lot of plays in Magic are quote unquote cheeky, but that's like a phrase that I'll use a lot for a lot of other casting situations across different games. And I think that that like is kind of fitting here. Like, you're just trying to be like, sure, oh no, my creatures are going to die. Just kidding. Phase out. Like, that phasing is at its core just like a very cheeky play. And so I think that that is like kind of one of the cards that if you were playing this matchup, you're not necessarily thinking about, but is going to end up being one of those things that is going to bring Steve up in a great way in this matchup.
So here it is, the attack. Chantelle says, if I'm going to trade this Redain for something, I want to trade it for the Adeline on the ground.
Ooh.
And here's Guardian of Faith, so let's see which creatures get phased out here.
Whoa. Oh, okay.
The answer, none?
None. Just go ahead and make a 3/2, which I mean, I can also respect. Like, it also was like one of those things where having something like the Guardian of Faith was like, I could go ahead and phase out Adeline, but like, is that really necessarily
right? It's not
better?
doing a lot.
Yeah.
And this does give us a surprise +1/+0. So it means that Adeline killed both of the blockers, whereas in Chantelle's calculation, she was just going to trade that Redain for the Adeline, and then the 2/2 would be left unscathed. So now Steve down to 5 from the crackback here. Elite Spellbinder comes down, nothing in hand to take away. That's an Ollenbach Escort. drawn to hand. Beky, $5 if you can recite this card without looking.
It gives a +1/+1 counter, gains some life if you sacrifice it. I feel like I've barely even played with this card in the draft
limited.
format
I don't
that
think
it's been popular
even...
with.
Yeah.
But it's a sick card nonetheless.
Okay, so we're gonna see the escort come down. Counter goes on Paolo, Elite Spellbinder. Chantelle's Spellbinder can trade, chooses not to. So really looking to push for lethal here, and this is how, you know, where it gets exciting in these creature matchups when both players are down to a very low life total. Steve's at 5, Chantelle's at
this is what I live for
3.
in aggro mirrors. This is it. Like, I could not think of a place where I am more stoked to be watching aggro mirrors than this exact moment.
And Chantelle, how much does Cave of the Frost Dragon take to activate?
I believe it's
5,
it's 4
right?
or 5. I think it's 5. I think Hive of the Eye Tyrant is 4. Cave
Well, yeah, I think it's 5.
5.
Yeah, no, it's 5 because
flying is better than menace a lot of the time.
Right. So Chantelle could, if Chantelle had drawn a land, would have just straight up had lethal in the air with the cave. As things stand, okay, this is gonna be the big attack in. So the 4/2 in the air is gonna get through. Chantelle is at 3 life. How is she going? I mean, this Legion Angel can't block more than 3 damage, right?
Nope. But I think it was one of those situations that was like, yeah, go ahead, do the block. There's not much that can be done either which way. So does result in Steve taking the first game against Chantelle. Good games coming across from both sides of the board. And now we get to see where we do some changes. I like adding in something like this Brutal Cathar. I would potentially be interested in something like this Valorous Stance. Like, being able to give something indestructible can be really important for combat, as well as being able to destroy something like a Luminarch Aspirant that gets too big. It's one of those things that I personally like doing, but a lot of control players are going for things like, say, this Portable Hole that we see Chantelle bringing in right now that is just like more reliable across the board.
Yeah, Portable Hole definitely has to come in because you need that early answer to the Luminarch Aspirants on the other side of the battlefield. I'm somebody that I'm kind of with you, Beky. Like, in the mirror or the aggro mirror, I want to try and go a little bit bigger. Want to try and go a little bit valuer. Is that a word?
I don't think it is, but I think everyone who's listening understands what you mean.
Right. Like, when I was playing Mono White, I was playing like Welcoming Vampire in the side for the mirror because it's just drawing a card every turn was just so powerful. But let's have a look at what Mono White is playing nowadays. Lion Sash is a pretty interesting card in the sideboard here. There is also, so Steve, we see maybe not relying on Portable Hole in this matchup.
Dawnbringer Cleric is an interesting card.
What is Dawnbringer Cleric?
It does some things with an again, it's another one of those cards that I can't remember. It was played in the draft format and I didn't really play it outside of there, so it's an interesting card that I'm like, I like know you, but I don't like know you.
I think it destroys enchantments. I think it's for the Naya deck. Right, like it comes in, it gains some life. I think you can also destroy enchantments, so you kill like a Showdown or a Jukai Naturalist.
Yes. No, that's good. That's very good.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, so we are in game number 2 of our third feature match of the evening. And for those of you who have just joined us, or if you came over from the Magic stream, you're watching the VML. We are a league for persons of marginalized genders in the Magic community. And every season, we send our winner to the next set championship. So we are currently in week number 3 of league play. Players are playing round robin within their divisions, and each, the top players from each division, the best finishers, will then play off over a series of elimination brackets until we find a winner at the end. And currently in our week 3 match, we have Chantelle on Boros Aggro, getting Rabbit Battery down, and that is going to
Whoa.
come in for 1. Beky, I absolutely love this card. I love the design, and I love to see it here in Standard.
Oh, what do you love about Rabbit Battery? It's one of those cards that, like, I've seen in a few people trying to play mono red aggro, and I'm like, it seems good, but it's always like I love both modification and I love being able to reconfigure, and I think that they're both great wordings for Magic, but it's one of those situations where I'm like, is it necessarily good in standard or constructed formats, or is it like one of those strictly limited sort of things?
I guess Chantelle's doing the science for us as we speak. We do have Adeline come down now on Steve's side, so that is going to be a pretty big blocker in the way. But look at this. This is why you play Rabbit Battery, so that when you play an Adeline and there's an Adeline on the other side of the battlefield, you can make your one bigger and with haste. And this is a huge attack coming in, Steve, all the way down to 4. Are you a believer now, Beky?
I'm a believer in Rabbit. You're right. I was a little unsure about Rabbit Battery, and Chantelle went and turned me the complete 180 in this situation.
And okay, so Valorous Stance is going to take care of Adeline.
Whoa. All right, so this is another place where reconfigure is just like such a good and such an important wording here. So being able to just go ahead and just like still have a 1/1 in play after the creature was removed, absolutely beautiful. Still great. This situation where like all of Chantelle's attacks are now like maybe not the best. Like, sure, Steve is at 4, but Steve isn't still in such like kind of a great spot. Like all of Chantelle's attacks like do end up losing Chantelle a lot of creatures. And this is starting to be a place where I think Steve is actually in a good spot going forward.
We are going to see the attack come in. So the 1/1, that is going to go through, potentially.
Ooh, all right, yeah, looks like Adeline is going to go ahead and block the 3/3. Only take 1. Hopefully Initiate will be good and will be allowed to pump up an attacker on the next turn, which is going to be very important. But Steve still making the correct call, saying, yeah, I get to attack for some amount of damage here, and like if I'm going to win the game, like Steve has to start getting some damage across too. And Den of the Bugbear is actually going to be the thing that really makes a difference for Chantelle here.
Den of the Bugbear is so sweet. I mean, the whole cycle of lands I think is great, and you can tell because they see play like almost every every iteration of that cycle is seeing play, which is fantastic, and not something that you always necessarily see. And now we're just going to see a massive come in. It is night, so that Brutal Cathar is a 4/4 with first strike thanks to the Rabbit Battery. Den of the Bugbear is going to pump out a 1/1. Hopeful Initiate is going to get the counter.
Oh, but I think like with some blocks can be made, and Steve can only take 2. So
right, but then what about next turn?
That's true. That's true. That's very fair. And we'll see if Steve is going to be able to draw anything to keep Steve alive in this game. But based on what I know about the mono white decks, I feel like we're going to be seeing potentially a scoop here, as 2 1/1s on Chantelle's side certainly doesn't bode very well for Steve.
And that Rabbit Battery, I mean, you could just attack all here. The Rabbit Battery could also have been reconfigured, so taken off the Brute to make another lethal attacker. But as things stand, it is going to be Chantelle who wins game number 2. So the mirror, quote unquote, is very tense indeed, and we're going to go into game number 3 with, you know, both players, I think, taking very different approaches to the sideboarding. Maybe, Beky, that's a result of the play-draw dynamic, but we see Steve, for example, playing, not playing these portable holes, but playing Valorous stances, and we see Chantelle just, trending the other way. Do you have thoughts on how, like, what the play-draw dynamic does to this mirror?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting situation where we see Chantelle being on the draw means that the Thalias are coming out, which I do I think I like and gonna go ahead and play something like that Valorous stance. So instead of playing aggressive, lock you out of making certain plays, is gonna go ahead and say, I'm gonna play reactionary, which typically is how the draw dynamic does work. So I like going ahead and making those changes, and we'll see if they end up working out for Chantelle.
Being said, that does find Athalia in the opening hand to go alongside Hopeful Initiate and Brutal Cathar. So nice 1-2-3 here for Chantelle. Let's have a look at what Steve's working with. Hopeful Initiate on the battlefield. And a bunch of 3-drops in hand.
Huh.
Like a bunch.
Like a bunch is a good way to describe it. Are in fact a lot. 2 elite spellbinders, I believe an Adeline and a Guardian of Faith. So yeah, a bunch is putting it nicely.
Honestly, that is kind of how this mono white deck feels sometimes. Because the white 3-drops right now that are available are just so good. They're so powerful that like you can't not play them. You know, you can't not play Elite Spellbinder and Adeline and Skyclave Apparition and Brutal Cathar. So sometimes you are just going to end up with these hands where you have to just play 1 3-drop every turn. But, you know, if you're on Chantelle's side of the battlefield, it's great news because you can start getting in. That Hopeful Initiate's going to start getting counters. You play a tap land here in that Den of the Bugbear.
Ooh, all right. I like this kind of aggressive portable hole onto this Hopeful Initiate, saying if you do attack back, like Hopeful Initiate's just going to get so big on the ground that it's going to be able to block Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, and like Chantelle doesn't want that to happen. So going ahead and saying, I'm going to use the mana that I have available and just clear that up right now. But like, this is one of the situations where like Chantelle should be like in a good spot for the plays that have been made, but as us as casters being able to see what is in both of these players' hands, like Steve is just in a leaps and bounds better position.
This has so much gas in the tank.
Oh yeah. I low-key did like feel a little rough about having so many 3-drops, but now being able to see like 3 mana and having nothing but 3-drops compared to Chantelle's hand of 2 lands and another legendary creature that's a copy of one already in play, like that's just rough.
Yeah, that is rough. Here's Brutal Cathar though. And, you know, Steve, very heads up here, left this Guardian of Faith open because, of course, Steve knew about that that Brutal Cathar having taken it out of hand with Elite Spellbinder and knew that it could come down this turn. That's going to enable an attack in with the 2 creatures that Chantelle has, but the crackback is going to be pretty intense.
Intense indeed, but still coming across and a lot of damage, as we mentioned, coming from Steve here, putting Chantelle down to 2 and with Steve at 12, playing this Elite Spellbinder as well and just taking all options away from Chantelle. You know, as Skyclave Apparition, not that bad of a draw, all things considered, but still not in a great place.
That Elite Spellbinder was so clutch for Steve because Chantelle would have had the double removal, right? Chantelle would have had the Fateful Absence for the 1 Spellbinder, Apparition for the 2nd Spellbinder, and able to block on the ground. And now Chantelle just has to stare at these 2 lethal threats with Fateful Absence costing 1 billion mana and not able to play both of these answers out. And wow, Elite Spellbinder really kind of saving the day / winning this game here for Steve, and that's gonna do it. Great stuff here from the NerdySteve. And honestly, Beky, is something, I think, a little bit of a learning moment as well for a lot of mono white players, because I can guarantee you that most of the time people in the mirror will just look at Elite Spellbinder and say, well, you don't tax very much, you know, all my opponent's stuff is cheap, I'm just gonna side them out for something, you know, for more removal. And Steve not doing that has led to this victory. So that is great stuff there from Steve.
I mean, it's one of those things where you also see Steve kind of making the heads up notice of like Elite Spellbinder is still flyer. And in a lot of situations where you are playing an aggro deck where you need to get across that last like 5 points of damage, like Elite Spellbinder can get there. Like having that evasion is one of those like last points of things. So like sure, getting to like do those extra taxing effects are very important, but Steve being like, you know what? Elite Spellbinder, also an evasive creature, also able
It's
to get
great.
across those last few points of damage, gonna keep it in. And it
Yeah.
ending up coming in very clutch there.
Yeah, I loved it. All right, so Becky, just one more feature match left this evening. I know, sad. But for those of you who are new to the VML, I hope you've been enjoying this awesome production. We are here every Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific. You can follow the channel, of course. You can also follow us on Twitter at VMLMTG, or you could go to VMLMTG.com to check out the league. And if you are interested in playing, or you know somebody who might be interested in joining our community, our Discord is now open for any Magic players of marginalized genders. Whether you're playing in the league or not, we are doing or hoping to be doing in the next couple of months some awesome new community initiatives that go beyond just the competitive league, beyond just what we do, what you're seeing right now. And we would love to have you join us. So, Becky, our last matchup of the evening. Should we find out who it is?
Yeah, let's go right into it. I'm excited. I'm here. I mean, everyone here is to watch Magic, and I'm excited to watch more Magic. I'm especially excited to watch more Magic because this is one of the archetypes that I've been the most excited for in Standard, and that is Orzhov Midrange.
Oh, you would.
I would. Yeah, I know.
Oh, does this kind of mid-rangey play some 4-drops that get value? That's just right up your alley, Becky.
Yeah,
it
it really is, on top of the fact that like anytime you're able to play, like my favorite archetypes are where you get to play things like Duress and Negate in the sideboard. You're playing a mid-range deck that just like has a strong game plan for something like the control matchups where you just play some of your creatures that are like quote unquote mid-rangey, and then also just get to play things like Duress, Negate. This is not exactly playing Negate, but it's playing some other things like Go Blank that have some great ways to combat a lot of the strategies. Like mid-range in a way to me is just like the perfect archetype because it plays things like Farewell to handle the aggressive strategies, plays things like Go Blank to handle the control strategies, and it's why one of the big reasons that I think this Orzhov mid-range deck is so strong in this metagame.
Yeah, and actually, if you look specifically at the version that Emma has brought, it is actually tending a little bit more assertive, right? We sometimes see these decks play, you know, I Twitch, Deadly Dispute, the kind of sacrifice package where they are just trying to durdle out and stall out the early game until they get to their big planeswalkers or the kind of recurring value creatures. But what the version that Emma's brought actually has quite a lot of assertive creatures. We have Luminarch Aspirant at 2, we have Silvercore Silencer, we have 4 copies of Wedding Announcement, 3 copies of Concealing Curtain. So this is a deck that can kill you very quickly and play the long game.
Yep. I also think that Emma has the absolute most correct response to both Luris as a cute, adorable cat and also just a threat in the format that it's
horrendous card for every competitive format. Yeah,
very cute, but does allow for some over-the-top shenanigans that I just don't very appreciate. So I like Emma's response to that on this slide as well. Should we take a look at what Emma is playing against?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go over. And it is Arya Karamchandani, who, one of the superstars of the VML, has won 2 seasons in the past. Is currently, or today, has been playing in the Neon Dynasty Championships. She's already qualified for Streets of New Capenna. She literally qualified, I think, in an NRG event or similar. Yeah, in an NRG event. The first weekend it was possible to qualify for Streets of New Capenna. And we see her here with Naya Runes, which she didn't really know what her opponent would play. She couldn't really get a read, and so just decided to bring what she thought was the best deck against an open field, which is Naya Runes. Any surprises?
I am a little surprised. I normally put Arya on playing whatever like is the best deck in the format, and I'm still like a pretty firm believer that the strongest deck in the format is something like the Orzhov midrange deck or the Hinata deck. Which also the Hinata deck is something that I feel like we've seen Arya play a lot of in the past. But so I am a little surprised to see Naya runes because I personally think that this deck like has a lot of flaws, but I think if anyone is going to be the person to pilot it flawlessly and in the way that it should be piloted to its extreme potency, it is going to be Arya.
Well, let's go down to the action and find out who is going to come out on top. Naya Runes versus Orzhov midrange. And both players with nice looking openers here. Emma with Silver Core Silencer, Restoration of Aganjo, Concealing Curtains, and Loth. And meanwhile, Arya has Visitor, Kami, and Runeforge Champion as the threats. And that is backed up with Showdown of the Skulls and the Rune of Sustenance as well.
Oh, this is a great hand for the Naya Runes deck. I think the only thing that could make it better is just like a little bit more consistent mana. Emma's gonna kind of try and tear it apart here with this duress, but like Rune of Sustenance is one of those like medium cards, like it's just gonna be replaced when the Runeforge Champion comes into play. And like Showdown of the Scalds, like Arya doesn't even know if she's gonna get to enough mana to play it anyway. So like losing it is like, it kind of sucks because like you expect to get to that amount of mana, but also like there's so many plays to be made in the meantime that it doesn't feel too bad to lose.
Can we talk about how sweet it is to lead duress into Silver Quill Silencer?
It's very
that's
good.
just incredible. Love it.
Silver Quill Silencer is one of those cards that like it got spoiled and it was like in its format and I was like, is this really like that impactful of a card? But like now that I'm starting to see how people are utilizing it, I'm like, oh, just kidding. I get it. I really do get it. That's kind of cool.
So Arya's actually just gonna play around it by not deploying the Runeforge Champion, just gonna make a 4/4 Kami of Transience. And Emma's going to need to find an answer to that. Restoration of Aganjo comes down. So chapter 1 is just going to get a plains, but chapter 2 provides some very interesting, a bit of ramp in white potentially, and could also, of course, bring back something that isn't a land, but usually a lot of the time you do see the land come back. Touch the Spirit Realm, the play.
Wow. I mean, Arya's also just been able to draw a lot of things that answer the Runeforge Champion being named off of that Silver Quill Silencer, on top of just like drawing the correct amount of lands to be able to curve out very well every single turn and also get this damage across. So now all of a sudden, like Emma's in a situation where they have to make a play and stat and just like try to protect life total as much as possible.
So Revealing Eye is emerges from behind the curtains, takes away that Runeforge Champion, and is a 4/5 blocker. Arya has found a rune off the top though, so the train is leaving the station once again. The generous visitors, those counters is going to go. Everything on the Kami, everything on the Trampler, looks like.
That's a great place to end up putting a lot of those counters. Let me tell you, being able to at least say that Kami of Transience having trample and having ways to give all the other creatures trample is just one of the great ways that this deck says, sure, you can make blockers, but like a blocker isn't going to be good enough. And it's one of the beauties of this runes deck.
So we are going to go to the sideboard after that. A very impressive game 1 from Naya Runes. And yeah, we see these Bloodchief Thirst, they're definitely going to come in, or the removal is coming in. What do you take out?
This is hard. This is one of the hardest parts about this deck a lot of the time too, is the black-white decks are playing like so many like 2 or like 1 or 3 copies. Like it's not a lot of the times like, oh, this card is bad, take all my 4 copies out and put in like some cards that I want. Like a lot of the time you're just like shaving a few copies. Like I do agree that Restoration of Aganjo is probably one of the weaker cards in this specific version of Orzhov midrange, so I'd like going ahead and taking those out. But like in this situation also just like deciding how many copies of Silver Quill Silencer are actually going to be good in this matchup is a little bit difficult for this exact list of Orzhov midrange.
I like shaving some Silver Quill Silencers as well. A lot of the time, when you're the runes, like you're drawing so many cards that you don't really mind if your Orzhov opponent is drawing an extra card or gaining 3 life, because what you're trying to do is so overwhelming compared to what they're doing with Silvercore Silencer. So I like to see that. A couple of copies of that come out as well. Let's have a look at game number 2 now. And Arya has Calming of Transients and 2 runes. It's going to keep. And meanwhile, Emma has Vanishing Verse to deal with the first threat, Wedding Announcement, Blood Chasers, and Farewell. So a very responsive hand for Emma.
And I think that like a responsive hand is a lot of the times where you want to be in this specific matchup of a white-black against like glass cannon, quote unquote, Bogle strategy from the Naya runes deck.
The Cammy is going to come down. We expect to see this answered, or perhaps for Wedding Announcement to come down.
Oh, this is a tough decision. Like, do you use the Blood Chief Thirst or do you use the Vanishing Verse? I feel like I would instinctively go ahead and do Blood Chief Thirst into Luminarch Aspirant, like trying to get as much damage across as possible. It is a tough decision, but it's also one of those things where like if something like a Runeforge champion were to come down next, I like saving this Vanishing Verse for something like that.
Yeah, the problem is that you can't kill Jukai Naturalist with Vanishing Verse, and you can't kill Runeforge Champion with Blood Chiefs. That's very well. So it's you kind of have to gamble a little bit, and it is going to pay off for Emma here, as it is Runeforge Champion that comes down. So Vanishing Verse is going to be able to answer that should Emma choose to do so. Of course, there is also this Wedding Announcement, which could get the card draw train flowing.
Yeah, that's hard too, because now it's like we have the mana where it feels like we're going to be close to casting this Farewell. On top of that, like there aren't good blocks for Arya. That was a tough decision, but I do respect going ahead and saying Runeforge Champion going to be potentially too much for me to deal with if it's going to draw a bunch of cards off of runes that are in hand, and just saying, all right, let's go. Oh,
yeah, I think that it was the right choice here for Emma, and Arya's going to scoop it up, not finding what she needs, because if you're in Emma's seat there, sure, one Runeforge Champion, that's not going to be doing a lot of blocking, but we have all seen and we all know what can happen if Jukai Naturalist comes down. It's just, you're just running the risk of putting yourself in a spot where you're allowing your opponent to combo off, as it were, when you could have not allowed that. And
yeah. And while we're watching the sideboarding happening, I also want to highlight what Arya actually did at like the very end of that game, which was throwing the runes onto some other permanents. Like that's something that I feel like a lot of people don't really do, like saying, yeah, this card cycles and I would rather have the draw card than simply hold this Rune of Might to attach to a creature, because sometimes the draw card is just more important than a lot of the other things that could be happening. So I really respect Arya's decision making in that respect.
So we have some interesting keeps here. Well, Arya's keep is kind of fine. I mean, Arya's keep is great. Like that's what you want. That's the hand you want, right? Emma has kept a 1 lander.
Hacker Mauling is technically a land.
Okay. All right. So Blood Chief says is going to kill the Naturalist, but Emma really trusts her deck. Let's just say that.
I've never trusted a deck as much as Emma trusts this black-white deck right now. I never, absolutely never.
And here's Runeforge Champion. Honestly, if Emma draws out of this, she's gonna feel like a genius. I get that. I understand that. Okay.
I mean, at least there's removal to back up. Like, if Emma doesn't continue to draw lands, like the Duresses are a fine fallback. Having that Infernal like does some nice things, so certainly there are plays to be made for a few turns regardless, but not being able to keep up with the amount of card draw that is going to be coming out of Arya's deck is going to make this a little bit of a nail biter.
So here's the first of 2 Duresses. Arya's just gonna let that one go. Tamu's safekeeping at ×2 plus Rune of Sustenance in hand.
This is a section where you're like, now my second dress looks bad. Like, it's either you take the 2
Hmm.
Tamiyo safekeeping or you take, the Rune of Sustenance and then are like, I'm in an awkward situation, but this is also a situation where Silver Quill Silencer, very good.
That's true. You just keep let Arya keep both. Okay, decides actually to name the Kami, which is also, you know, very defensible since that Kami would be representing quite a big threat. But Arya, meanwhile, has found the Trample rune, Rune of Might. Content to just kind of sit back on this Jukai Naturalist, holding up a Tamiyo safekeeping that Emma knows about. 2 copies being held up now that Emma knows about.
I want to go ahead and throw out that Emma is also finding way more lands than I feel like I ever would have if I kept a hand like this. So there is something to be said for Emma having enough faith in her deck to be like, yeah, I'll draw some lands. It's fine.
I mean, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to win if you don't trust your deck?
Is that why I don't win? It's all making sense to me now.
Do you think Heart of the Cards is just you know, a platitude? No, it's real.
That's a
There's
Yu-Gi-Oh
a physical
thing.
heart.
That's a Yu-Gi-Oh thing. Regardless,
We're all
still
part of
has-
the same family, Beky.
Sure.
We're all part of the same wider umbrella of cardboard nerds.
Still has the Tamiyo safekeeping in hand, so continuing to keep the
Oh.
pressure on. And now, like, Emma is at 7, which is definitely a low life total in a place where the runes deck is like, I'm just like a string of spells away from saying the game is over.
Yes. Except, is the game over?
I mean,
Arya's
being
going
able to
off,
draw
like,
revealing
terribly.
or concealing curtains and then immediately flip it into revealing eye is certainly not the worst.
So here we go. It's going to be the block. And we're going to see Tamiyo safekeeping now used essentially as a combat trick to just eat that revealing eye. Tamiyo Transience still on the battlefield. And here it is. Emma has found the 5th land. Here's Loth.
Off
She's
of a
going to
one
make
land keep.
2/1s. This is incredible stuff here. Arya really needs to find something. Second Cameo Transience is not good. That is not what you want to see if you are, you know, in Arya's seat, because that potentially is another card off Silver Quill Silencer, is another card off, and it's another 3 life.
Oh, okay. So I do like this block from Emma saying, sure, I'll... Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so Arya's going to get to kill all 3 of these creatures. Loth will go back up to 4 loyalty.
And then can lose 3 once more to make 2 more tokens. So I actually quite like saying, sure, I'll lose all my creatures. I'll be able to make some more. And like the double Kami of Transience allow for some, like if 1 enchantment is drawn, like Arya still gets to do some insane things. But Emma does now have the land to cast Farewell on the next few turns. So it's looking like it's anyone's game at this point. But a showdown of the skulls?
Showdown of the skulls.
There's not a better draw that
goodness.
Arya could have
Oh
had. There is not.
goodness.
There literally
How
is not.
does she do it? Here it is. Showdown of the Skulls. 4 cards at the top. What are they? Runeforge Champion, Rune of Might, second showdown. So the second showdown is going to put 2 more counters. Is this legal? These have trample.
They do
So
have
that-
trample.
Oh my goodness. This is 6 damage?
It's 6 damage, but
Oh
if
my
like
goodness.
oh wow.
Oh my goodness. So this is 6 damage coming across. 1 away. Arya does not attack because doesn't want to put those more counters on Loth. Emma's oh my goodness. It's the wondering Emma. Okay, we are losing it in the booth officially. Here's
I wish this is a situation where I wish
everyone.
everyone could see my face because I'm like hands over my mouth, just like whoa.
Holy moly.
I mean, the Farewell is just like the
Farewell.
right play. Like if you're Emma, you're
Oh
like,
my
okay, the
goodness.
board has to be clear. I can't deal with like anything, but you're also able to see that like Runeforge Champion was revealed, and Runeforge Champion also equates to a haste attacker, and this is just like such a crazy situation to be in. And Jukai Naturalist also being the flip
Oh my
off the
goodness.
showdown
Wait,
of the
Arya
skulls.
this can
Yeah,
string it together, right?
Yes. No,
Here's the
and that's
visitor.
exactly why you pick something like this Naya Runes deck, is because of the moments that are just like this, where you're like, oh, yeah, I can just end up stringing a bunch of things together, like Runeforge Champion into Rune of Speed into, like, attack for, guess what? A lot of damage is just so insane.
Hey, there's still a land drop to be made.
There's a land drop to be made, and I think that we have enough lands to play...
Wait,
maybe
what
not
is
the white
happening?
mana to play a Jukai Naturalist.
Right. Wait, so Arya passes
Ooh.
it back? Interesting. So we're gonna see... Okay. I do understand that, because Arya's... Okay, if you're Arya in RSC, you're like, okay, I've got through the first farewell. Right?
There's no way there's a second one.
There's no way there's a second. No way.
But
there's only 3 in the deck.
Emma kept one.
Emma has
kept
been
2 for a reason.
sandbagging these farewells ever since that one land opener. There's the second farewell, so that's going to take care of everything else on the board. Arya still has a Rune of Speed in hand and a Jukai Naturalist available to play, I believe.
Which is 3 damage, and there's nothing that Emma can do this turn. So that's at least 3 damage. And if that Rune of Speed were to draw into some more things, slash if there's a generous visitor, I mean, I think we still need 1 more point of damage. Because
there's still 1 more, right?
Yeah, we play generous visitor.
Okay, so here's the Jukai Naturalist. That puts the counter on. Rune of Speed, that's going to put another counter on Visitor.
But if this rune puts anything that is an enchantment that could target something...
That is not it. Okay, so we play on. We play on. Emma lives to fight another day. This is incredible. Emiria's Call, by the way, is now a possibility.
Oh my gosh.
Second Wandering Emperor is a possibility. Silvercore Science are available as well. So Emma could do something like play the Wandering Emperor, kill the
generous visitor.
4/3, the visitor. Play Silvercore Sciencer as a blocker. But then Arya has the removal spell.
Oh my gosh.
These okay. This is very tense. So can Emma make
all right, Emma at least gained 3 life. So like for what Arya has in hand currently, Arya, even with this portable hole, does not win the game.
Right.
And there's at least that. I like naming Rune of Might. It says if you have a Rune of Might, and that's going to be the thing that like could get you to enough power to kill me from this spot, I'm at least negating that. This is such a tense place, and it's so hard because Emma is like on the precipice of turning the corner, but also is at such a low life total that it's like,
oh my goodness, that's a Runeforge champion. Oh my goodness, this game has been just on razor sharp edges the entire time.
But that's gonna be it. The Rune of Speed is enough. I've lost it. I'm like getting up from my chair all over the place.
Emma knows it's enough. There's the GGs, there's the concession, and Arya Karamchandani is going to take this one down 2-1. But mad props to Emma. Mad props to Emma because she. Okay, first of all,
Emma lived in that game for way longer off of keeping
one
land.
Yeah. I think there are so few people that would have had the courage to do that. Obviously,
and not me. I'm a wuss.
Yes.
I take that back.
And she just knew, she was like, okay, I have these 2 duresses. I can take a bunch of these combo pieces out of Arya's hand. I have a Bloodchief Cess. Like, I can do things with this 1 mana. And if I draw more, you know, I have the Farewell, I have the Lock. If it's a long game, and I can make it a long game with these 1 mana spells, then I'm going to be able to draw and play all these, you know, incredible value engines. So massive props to Emma. Of course, congratulations to Arya. Just pulling it out there in that last turn. Very, very tense game, very close game. So good job to both players, but it is Arya that is going to advance. So I believe 2-1 in the league. But it is early days yet. We do play 7 whole weeks of division play. You play each other player in your division. So each division has 8 players in it. And at the end of that, the top 2 from each division go through to the playoffs straight away. And then we have some wild cards as well for the top finishers by standing. So a lot of, a lot of play yet to happen in the VML. We do, in general, if you think about the records, 5-2 is mostly a lock to get into playoffs, and then 4-3, some numbers of 4-3 will make it. So it's at this stage of the tournament, it is not over for anybody. Everybody is still in with a chance to get to the next set championship. So great stuff from all of our players tonight, Beky. Any thoughts about standard, about the VML set championship, Magic the Gathering?
This is one of the most solid standards that I feel like I've seen in a long time. I think that the array of strategies that are currently in standard right now are just some of the best. Like, I love this Naya runes deck. I love that it is both like an aggro and like kind of a combo deck. I love that there is an aggro deck that has some control-y facets to it. I love that there are a lot of control decks, and I love that there's also like the Hinata deck that I would also call more of a combo deck as well. I think that is just like one of the coolest arrays of decks that we've seen in standard in a long time, with also some other like fringe strategies along the way from cards that people just like kind of consider their pet cards and are really attracted to in the current standard format. So standard is really beautiful right now. If you aren't playing it, maybe consider playing it. If you're still in love with like alchemy and historic, those are also great formats right now too, and you should maybe check out NRG series, who's having an alchemy tournament tomorrow that the winner will qualify for the New Capenna Set Championship. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and look up NRG series on MTG Melee.
And all that's left to say is thank you to everybody who stuck around. Thank you to everyone who was here at the beginning. Thank you to everyone who came over from the Magic channel. We love all of you. We hope you've enjoyed the show this evening. And if you want to catch us again, follow us on Twitch. We will be back here every Friday during the season at 6 p.m. Pacific. Thank you once again to all of our sponsors, Wizards of the Coast, for making everything happen. Good luck, high five, who are just awesome. And our NRG series, who Beky talked about already. And all that's left to say, Beky, really, is thank you for hanging out.
Oh, well, thank you. I also had a great time. It was fantastic. And that was some of the best matches of standard I've watched in a long time. They were literally all so close, and they were a ton of fun to watch.
All right. So we will say good night. We hope you have a brilliant rest of your weekend. We will see you back here next week. Enjoy the rest of the set championship. And yeah, have a great time.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.